This time, we talk about carrying a passenger on a motorcycle. Whoa, what a lovely noise. Right, before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Carrying a passenger. It really does seem to have gone out of vogue. Back in the day, it was perfectly normal for motorcyclists to carry passengers all the time. To some extent, when the crash helmet law came in, because you had to carry a lid with you if you wanted to carry a passenger or pick somebody up, then that had a very negative effect on the numbers of people being carried as passenger, and of course the number of riders too, for that matter. There's a surprising number of very experienced riders, some of them journalists, who say they've never or very rarely have carried a passenger. To me, this is very detrimental to motorcycling. Ultimately, I went up. Because if you don't carry your spouse or your family with you and you make it just a boys' day out, as time goes on, it's less and less likely that you're actually going to ride the thing. Simply because you're going to get a lot of pressure from your partner or significant other or the rest of your family not to go out riding because you're kind of being selfish, which in a way you are if you're just on your own. I think if you carry a passenger, the beauty really is it's something that you're doing together, and you never know when you're going to need to. If a friend breaks down or something like that, I can never really see the point of a bike that really can't carry a passenger. It just seems to me idiotic, really, that they would design a bike that way. I understand it for a race rep, but even on otherwise comfortable bikes, the passenger accommodation is very poor. And I think many people these days have got to a point where they're probably quite intimidated about carrying a passenger because it's something that's done so rarely. And there's really no reason for that to be so. Carrying a passenger is not difficult, and it's quite enjoyable because you're doing something with a friend or family. But there are things to remember. One thing, if it's a newer bike with adjustable suspension, you're going to need to wind that suspension up a little bit to accommodate the extra weight on the back. And also, you may need to change the tyre pressures, because most motorcycles will tell you a tyre pressure for carrying a passenger and for carrying solo and for luggage and things like that. It's probably not a bad idea just to run the bike on that slightly higher pressure. It shouldn't really adversely affect your handling in dry normal conditions, so it really shouldn't make a huge difference. And at least then the bike's always ready, because otherwise you're going to be putting extra air in, but from where? You're going to have to take a compressor with you just in case you pick a friend up or somebody breaks down or something. I mean, personally, I did all my coursing. I met my wife on a motorbike. I think she only went out with me because I got a motorbike, really. So I think it is a way really that you can meet people and socialise, carrying a passenger. It makes bikes something of a less of an antisocial condition, less of an antisocial habit. The other thing is, if you carry a passenger, that passenger may at some point decide they want to try out motorcycling for themselves, and that can only be a good thing, because as it stands at the moment, motorcycling is dying, and we need to do something to encourage people on it. The more passengers we carry, the better. I think the important thing when taking a passenger is really not to ride like a maniac. You're not trying to show off. You want them to have an enjoyable experience. So the whole thing is not just about you riding like a maniac, riding faster than you would do normally, just to try and frighten somebody. Bike isn't a fairground round after all. And you want them to have a positive, you want them to have a positive memory of their experience on your bike. That way they'll want to do it again, and also they might want to take it up themselves. And that again is a positive. We need to be doing something to encourage them once again to get people onto bikes. But the important thing when you're carrying the passengers, above all, to get them to relax. Once the passenger's relaxed and they're leaning with the bike, your life becomes much easier. If you've got somebody that's sitting rigid or they're thrashing around all over the place, they're just not relaxed, it upsets the whole handling of the bike and makes your life more difficult and a little bit more dangerous. So do relax your passengers. Don't try and scare them. Get them relaxed, get them chilled out, get them looking forward to the ride, not dreading it. It's important also to choose the right machine. Some bikes really are hopeless at carrying a passenger more than a very short distance. I mean, we're not just looking at sports bikes here. Many modern bikes have very poor passenger accommodation. And what we're looking for when it comes to passenger accommodation is a few things. One, a seat that's bigger than your hand. Some of this that's not tiny. Some of the seats are really, it's almost against trade descriptions to describe them as seats. They're so small. You'd want a seat that looks as if it's comfortable, something roomy. But also it needs to be well padded, because there's no point having a roomy seat that's basically like a block of wood with some leather stuck over the top, and believe me, some bikes really do feel that way.
And of course there are essentially two types of seat. There's a split level and basically a flat seat, rather like on this BSA. On the flatter seat, you're tucked in out to the weather if you're the passenger. The downside is you don't get such a great view. Of course, with a step seat, the opposite is true.
Good legroom's also important. Most modern bikes with a high exhaust in particular offer terrible levels of legroom. And what's particularly annoying, I think, is that some of the machines with those tucked under exhausts, they've got all the space in the world, but they still provide the passenger with bugger all legroom. Well, why? They could provide them with ample legroom to make them comfortable. Because if you're, speaking from experience really, if you're on the back of a bike with tiny legroom, you really quickly get cramp in your legs. It's horrible. And again, you're not going to enjoy the experience, and you're not going to be able to enjoy it over anything like a distance. And sometimes that's true on bikes that look comfortable. You know, some bikes come with a comfortable seat, they've got plenty of leg room, but they still don't get it quite right. There's something about the ergonomics which doesn't quite work out. The position of the pegs, even though there's room, the roomy, the position of the seat. I suppose the important thing about the seat is it needs to be of a suitable length as well as padded. There's no good having the most comfortable seat in the world if the thing is so short that actually she or he can't fit their entire bum on the thing and they're kind of hanging off the back. Because if you're barely on the seat of a bike and you feel it falling off the back, that's going to unnerve you, and it's going to ruin the whole experience. Grab rails are really useful, but they're not essential. You don't really need a grab rail on the back, as long as you're not accelerating like a complete idiot. Most passengers can just sit naturally. They can grab hold of you. You can get things like pillion pals, where basically it's a belt with two hoops on, so they can hold on to you. If you don't want them pushing and pulling you though, then don't ride like an idiot. As long as you don't do that, it's really not so bad. What? Oh look, yeah. That's some poor parking, isn't it? Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dearie me, Mr. Clio man. Now there are no age limits or size limits for a passenger on a motorcycle, any more than there are for any other vehicle. However, the passenger must be able to reach the foot pegs, but there's nothing in law that says you can't adjust the foot pegs. You can't have raised up have raised foot pegs to cut the leg room down if you've got a very short passenger or a child. And in fact, that's exactly what we did with the BSA Starfighter. We did 2 really high up foot pegs when Tom was small. Another great thing to do when if you're just carrying a child on the bike, is to fit a top box. The reason a top box is really useful, although they do have a sort of low reputation of being a little bit pizza delivery, but the great thing about them is when you're carrying a passenger, it provides them a really sturdy foot backrest, something for them to lean against, and that can make a child or a nervous person, somebody that's not used to being on a bike, feel a little bit more secure. They feel like when you open the gas, they're not going to fly off the back. Certainly whenever I carried Tom as a child, we always used to fit a top box, and it worked really well. We put a little armrest on it for him so he could just rest his arms, and Tom would even have a nap on the back, he was so relaxed. And it's really paid dividends, because now Tom, if he goes in the back of a bike, he's totally chilled. He's ridden all over Europe as a young teen on the back of us, had a great time, and he's never felt nervous about motorcycles. And it's simply because as a family we carried him as a passenger all the time, and we weren't selfish and just went out on our own and left Tom behind. It's important with motorcycling, if it's going to survive, that we'll make it something that whole families do together, not just one individual, whether they be male or female, that the whole family do together. I mean, there's certainly people that thought that carrying Tom as a youngster, that we were irresponsible in doing so and put him at great risk. But then, really? I mean, if we'd taken him out, when we took him out on one of those tandem bicycles, he was actually at greater risk than he would be on a motorcycle. And if he went pony trekking, the same. They're actually more dangerous pastimes. But then people wouldn't call you irresponsible if you sent your child on ski lessons. Again, pastime that's more dangerous. And at the end of the day, we did exactly what we would advise everybody to do in carrying a passenger. When we had Tom with us, we did not ride like idiots, we didn't take risks. You rode with that extra level of caution. When you're carrying a passenger, you have a duty of care to that individual. The way that we've got Tom onto bikes isn't that we suddenly turned up one day and said, right, here's a bike, you're going to learn to ride a bike as we do. It's because we carried him as a passenger, really from quite a young age. The other nice thing about carrying a passenger is you've actually got somebody to talk to. Because if you're on a very long ride, it'll be pretty solitary. You can start to go a little bit stir crazy. So having somebody to have a little chat to on the slower moments, it's quite nice. And you can make yourself heard, even this bike, which is not the quietest, to be honest. You can certainly make yourself heard and have a conversation of sorts. You can't read poetry over it, but you can still make yourself heard. Better still, of course, is you could have an intercom system and then you can chat away. You may or may not, that may or may not, of course, be a good thing. I mean, you may like the fact you can't hear what the wife's saying while you're riding along. I must admit, if I find she's going on a bit, I just open the throttle and drown her out with a bit of noise. Nice. So on reflection, I would definitely encourage other people to carry passengers on their bikes. I've always done it, and I've always enjoyed the experience. Some bikes don't handle it quite so well, I admit, but generally the experience has been pretty positive, so I would certainly encourage it. So to wrap things up, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and of course, thank you very much for watching.